Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking of a line my life coach always tells me when I'm getting upset or prickly about anything. And she says, "Is this how you want to feel about this?" And I'm like, well, no, I want to feel good. I want to be okay. I don't want this to upset me. And I think sometimes in these conversations, we're so busy trying to protect ourselves or defend ourselves. And again, that's coming from our wounds that we have, that we lose sight of the goal of we want to feel good. We want more love in our lives. We want more happiness in our lives. We want more peace in our lives. I don't know anyone who doesn't want a more peaceful, calm coexistence in their life. It doesn't feel good to be angry and scared and all the time. I don't know. Maybe somebody out there does want that, but community feels so good. Friendship feels so good. So to get to that place of, this is the life that I want to feel, I have to hold the door open if I'm going to have that life. I can't let the fear say, I'm going to close this door because I don't know who that person is. I know their arms are full or whatever, but that could be a threat. And I just need to protect myself. You have to think a little farther out. I think we can be very reactionary, thinking of things in the short term and not think long term. How do we want this to play out? And I think where that's reflected in my book is in my relationship with my mom. There's a big story arc there of where we started when we were very close. I thought growing up, I was like, I have the best mom in the world. We were very close. When I came out, our relationship became very fractured. And I had people who said, cut her out of your life. You don't need that negativity. You don't need that people to put you through that. And I finally had somebody who said, well, what if you could have any type of relationship with her, what kind of relationship would you want? And I said, I love my mom. I want to have a relationship with my mom. And they said, okay, so what does that look like and how do you get there? And can you just love her for where she is right now? Because you can't change her. You're not going to change her. And if you choose that you want that relationship as part of your life, then you just need to love her for where she's at right now. You can still draw boundaries and keep yourself healthy and safe, but don't close the door. And, I had my book launch last night and my mom was there in the audience and taking pictures, and she brought her friends from church and her husband was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life. I was so grateful. And my fiance Jen was there and so many friends from all areas of life. And I'm like, I'm just grateful for whatever reason that I was able to overcome a lot of different fears and just keep the door open. And I hope from the story that maybe it gives other people hope as well, where they feel like maybe that doors have closed in their life, to see if that's still a relationship that they can, a connection that they can still keep that may reopen.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. My friend is here. Jillian Abby is here. And if you go back in time, way back in time, my guest was on for a back-to-back episode. We had an amazing conversation and I made a new friend. And I'm so happy to have you back again, Jillian. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm so happy to be back. Was it last year that we did it? Or was it like 5 years ago, 20 years ago? I don't know. We go way back. We don't.
We're old friends now, which is great.
Very cool.
And I got to say, since that recording, and if you haven't heard it, I'll put links. You got to go back and listen. I have come across some people in my journey that are on a similar path to you, have questions, and the first answer I give them is your email and your website. I send them to you. Okay. Just because I know that anyone that I send to you will be loved and cared for, nurtured, encouraged. That's who you are. And that's how I'm starting the podcast, by saying that, because I trust you implicitly that these people I send your way are going to get help. And I'm proud to do that, because I know they're going to be loved when they come across your doorstep. So it just happened like the last couple of weeks. I met a listener in the US, and she's a queer mom, and she's starting a podcast, and she has so many questions, and she knows that I don't have the answer to these questions. And I'm like, you got to talk to my friend Jillian. So that's so cool to find people in life that you can connect with and do life with beyond an interview, beyond a recording. So thank you for being that for me.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to say, I'm so honored. I'm out of words right now. This podcast is going to get weird because I don't have any words in me. But no, I'm really honored. Gosh, it warms my heart to think that I have become that space for people, because I didn't start that way. I was a very judgmental person. I was very set in my ways. I had a lot of strong biases against the LGBTQ community, and obviously myself, and driven by my perfectionism and people pleasing, and just the way I grew up and where I grew up and what I listened to and what I believed. This is how life is. And so I'm really grateful that in some ways my life kind of unraveling and coming apart, that I've been able to rebuild it in a way that feels so good to me. And I've met so many good people along the way who have helped mold my perspective and change my perspective. I've heard so many more stories that I realize that, whether my book is about queerness and someone else's book is about being an Indigenous person, and someone else's book is about being Jewish, whatever it is, like, we all have our stories and backgrounds, and there's so much I don't know. And so I'm just more open to learning and hearing stories and like, what makes you you? Mm-hmm. And it's such a more fun and full way to live, I find, right, than me painting a person into a box and thinking, okay, this is who you are, and we probably won't get along. But it's not easy. But anyways, so thank you for the kind words. And I am totally happy. I don't always have the answers either, but I will always make space for a person to share their story, and I'm happy to listen.
It shows in everything you do. So it's not
on my
fake.
T-shirt.
It's on your T-shirts everywhere, right? Okay, so when we talked back in the day, when I had you on originally, you were wrestling with the name of your book. I don't know if you remember that conversation. You had feedback from your community. You were struggling with what to call this thing. This is like a baby. Like, you're trying to name a baby. So you're trying to give it character and direction, and you're trying to, give it a life, basically, by creating this book. How did you settle on the name? And let's talk more about the launch of the book. I love this.
Okay. Yeah. So the book was originally, last time we spoke, the book was operating under the name A Chronic Case of Hetero. And the sales team said, yeah, that's, quirky, and, maybe we'll catch some attention and all, but we're not selling that book. Come up with something else. So I at first I was a little emotional and attached to it, like, well, that was mine, and this is the perfect name. And then I realized that, like, why not explore all of the options? And so we brainstormed, gosh, I don't know how many options. I had at least 60 or more ideas that I pitched to them for different titles. And one of the last ones that I pitched was Perfectly Queer. And I was kind of on the fence with it. And now I have so fallen in love with the title. It's a perfect title for the book, not because it very obviously states that it's about queerness and also my perfectionism, which runs throughout the book. But I realized that only recently have I really stepped fully into my identity as a queer person and loving that piece of me and feeling like a welcomed and important part of my community instead of the imposter that somehow snuck in and is trying to like find my place. And I also realized too that we have a lot of ideas and stories about what a perfect life is, and that I was always trying to create that perfect life. And in early on in the story, for me, I said there's no such thing as perfectly queer. You couldn't have those two words together, because queer I didn't see as an ideal label. Again, that was kind of my internalized homophobia that I was working through, is that I did rank relationships, and a heterosexual relationship was the ideal that I wanted to work towards. So I'm proud to have those two words together, and that really, whatever our label is, whether it's queer, whether it's whatever, you could switch out any other word here that better fits with your life. But we should all be working towards trying to create the version of our life that feels most perfect to us. There is no perfect, and so in that way, it's all perfect.
Yeah.
If it's what feels right and true to us. So,
okay, so
yeah.
For those listeners who are hearing your voice on my show for the first time, they haven't gone back. You need to. Can you give us kind of like the mile high version of your story as it relates to our conversation, so we can kind of use that as a starting point?
Yeah. So we are flying a drone over the top of the story. It's about me being a mother and a wife to my first serious boyfriend, who I met freshman year of college. We were together for almost 20 years. I homeschooled our children. We ran a small business together. We had a house in the suburbs, and our life looked perfect by all accounts. But through a series of events, but primarily the main event was a craniosacral therapy session that I had, where I was finally able to verbalize that I was not straight, that I was gay. I don't know if I said gay, or probably didn't say queer or lesbian at that point, because it took me a while to get comfortable with those words. But I came out in that craniosacral therapy session, and it was the first time that I accepted that piece of me, and that I also loved that piece of me and felt fully integrated. And such an amazing feeling until you sit up at the end of the session and you're drinking your glass of water, and then reality sets in that I have to hop back in my minivan and drive home to my husband and my children. And now I know that I'm a lesbian. I know that we will always have this fundamentally unfixable piece of our marriage.
Yeah.
And what do I do?
Right. What an amazing drive home. Like, I can't imagine being in the passenger seat and being on the road with you in that moment.
And the therapist lives an hour and a half away. I mean, boy, talk about time to noodle through something. So yeah, it was a big moment and a big shift. And I think maybe what makes my coming out story a little bit different is that because I came out in therapy, I didn't have another person. There was nobody that I was attracted to that, I want to start a relationship with her.
Okay. Yeah.
And so in some ways that was absolutely terrifying, because I was like, well, how do I really know I'm gay besides I think I'm really gay?
Yeah.
But and also, again, having a seemingly perfect life and then knowing that I'm going to give this up and I have zero idea what's in my future. I don't know if I'll ever find a person. I could be alone the rest of my life, because if I make the decision to come out. So it was, but I had the gift and the benefit of time. Yeah. And so I was able to decide somewhat on my terms, how I wanted to do that, when I wanted to come out, who I wanted to come out to. And I think that also speaks to the importance of not outing people.
Yeah.
Because time is such a gift when going through such an intimate and delicate process.
So someone's listening to our episode right now. Jillian, they're in the van.
Yeah.
They are doing something. They're on their way home. They're doing errands. And they're like pulling over on the side of the road right now because they are at the exact same point that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And however the universe works, that this moment happens for them to hear your voice right now while they're by themselves. And they're at that spot. What would you say to them right now?
Well, you may be physically alone in your minivan or whatever vehicle you're in, but we're never alone in our lives. And that's not only from a social standpoint. You may not have anybody in your immediate area that you can connect with, but there are people online that you may be able to connect with. And then even for those who believe in a spiritual power or a higher power, like I was never a religious person, but in that feeling of aloneness, I really anchored to my spirituality as well. And I just had to believe that I would be held and caught in whatever leaps I had to make in my life. So that's the first thing, is that they're not alone in whatever this hard choice is, whether it's somebody who's coming out later in life and saying, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? Or anyone else, particularly parents who have children and maybe navigating any difficult change, whether that's a huge career change, whether that's moving across the country, whether that's facing a divorce, getting out of an abusive relationship.
Right.
We all have to make hard decisions at some point, but there is support out there. And it's so important to find your community and your safety net to hold you as you go through the process.
So the one thing I'm picking up on when I turn on the evening news, Jillian, is there's this line in the sand, and there's a lot of fear and a lot of comments that are being hurled over that line back and forth that drive a wedge and make things seemingly worse when we try to have a conversation as humans on how we can love and care for each other. What are you celebrating right now? And what are you worried about right now?
Oh, that is a big question. So I am in Florida right now, which is a huge hotspot for, I just learned the other day that they have passed a bill where medical practitioners and insurance companies can deny me care, which seems to go against the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. And I'm not sure how exactly that reflects anything that Jesus did. But aside, there is a lot of, I think that just speaks to the fact that there is so much divide right now between some people, and we're not even getting back to the core issues that are at hand and whatever is trying to be fixed by all of these bills that are happening, whether we call it safety for people or, strengthening families or whatever it is. One thing I am encouraged about is that there are so many more conversations that are happening. I'm learning so much more about our trans community right now. I'm learning from parents who have trans children about what gender affirming care and that process is actually like versus what I'm being told from various sources. I'm learning why people have fears around the LGBTQ community. And actually, I appreciate when people share that, when they share what they've been taught about why they have concerns about LGBTQ people existing in the same way that anyone else does. As far as the things that, well, I'm going to stick with what is still good right now. If I could share a brief story, my kids we were homeschooling. The kids went back to school this year. And so we started with a private school. It wasn't the right fit for them. So we put them back into public school. But before we went to public school, I had to meet with the private school administrator to let her know why we were leaving. And she asked what school the kids were going to next. And I told her, and she said, "Oh, you need to be careful." And I said, "Well, what do I need to be careful for?" Because obviously children's safety in schools and everything in the United States, especially right now, is a big concern. And she leaned in and whispered, "The gay agenda," which I almost fell off of my chair because I thought she knew. I mean, I had brought my partner, Jen, we had gone to school events. And I was kind of blindsided of like,
what?
It's not my sister. I don't know who you, okay.
Yeah.
But I was not, so the old me, the one who had more freshly come out, would have fought back. I would have felt like a dog backed into a corner having to defend myself.
Okay.
And I would have barked back with, "You don't know what you're talking about, and you're homophobic, and this and that and the other thing." While that all may be true, there's no conversation that's going to happen from that. And so I know there's a lot of talk around curiosity now. And I was like, we're going to go the curious route on this conversation. And I said, "Oh, can you tell me more? What is that? What do you mean? What does that look like at the kids' school?" And she said, "Well, I've gotten pictures from my friend of some of the health textbooks that they use, and they're teaching gay sex." And I said, "Oh, that's really interesting." I said, "Do you happen to know if those textbooks also have pictures of heterosexual sex acts in them?" And she said, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "So if we're thinking about this, do you think the school has a whole textbook that is just gay sex? Like that's just what we're teaching the kids right now?" He's like, "Well, no, probably not, but it just wasn't appropriate." And I said, "Was it not appropriate because you didn't like that you didn't find it so health related and that it was more like a how-to manual?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, I just don't know that they should be learning the how-to of it." And I said, "Okay, you have your right to your opinion on that." But I said, "But as a school administrator, I think we can agree on the fact that queer kids do exist, though, right? Do we have a common ground there?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Because you have queer kids in this school. Like my daughter and son have befriended them." And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay. So when I came out at 38 years old, I realized how little education I had about how to keep myself sexually safe and healthy. And when I tried to reach out and look for materials and resources, there wasn't a whole lot out there."
Right.
I said, so if we know that queer kids exist and we believe that straight kids have a right to learn how to keep themselves healthy and safe, why would we not afford that same health and safety to queer kids as well?
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point, we were both kind of a little stunned in that moment because I thought she was an ally. She thought I was a straight person.
Wow.
And so it was a lot for us to think through, but I was grateful that we could at least sit and have the conversation and like, well, let's ask questions. What does this feel like to you? What is the concern here? And so it's not that, I don't know. I'm not saying that there aren't things that are maybe being taught or mentioned in some places, but that some people are not comfortable and appropriate with, but people are latching on to such a small data point or one story and losing sight of the fact that queer people are part of our community.
Right.
And instead of how do we get rid of them, it's how do we acknowledge and integrate them into our society in the most safe, loving, equitable way possible. And that's the discussion that we're not having right now. So, Dave, I know you asked me some questions at the beginning, and I feel like I took a detour off a dirt road there, but it really just, it goes back to having the conversations and neither person feeling like they have to defend themselves. It's just here is my understanding based on what I've been through.
Right.
Tell me what yours is like. And I think that's where a lot of the fear can go away, because then you start to hear what's actually happening as opposed to stories and videos and things that people are creating for clicks and for engagement. And, we just have to get back to seeing the humanity in each other, regardless of where we're coming from.
Right. So what is your message that you're demonstrating to your kids? And what kind of questions are they coming back to you with as a parent? Like, I would not want my parent to be vilified in the public space, because that's my parent, and I love and support my parents. So what kind of things are they coming back to you, and what are you having to course correct or shed light on to give them more clarity? Can you kind of give us a sense of that?
My kiddos are so interesting. I mean, I think all kiddos are interesting in their perspective at things, depending on their age as well. But we went to a Pride event last year that was in a more rural part of Florida. And it wasn't a ticketed event, which means anybody can attend. And it was open for everyone to come in, including the protesters. And so I remember standing with my kids, and we were walking around and checking out the different vendor booths, and a man with body cameras dressed in all black with a megaphone got very close to us and started screaming, "You are a derelict mother. You are a derelict mother for bringing my kids to this event." I don't know that they understood what that meant, but it's scary when you have a group of people dressed in all black with signs that say you're going to burn in hell getting in your face and just saying you're a bad parent just because you're here. And so that was something we had to talk about after the fact. And the kids just they didn't understand why anyone would be so mean. They didn't understand the point, and they're like, my son was even like, "How does he know you, Mom?" I said, "Oh, he doesn't know me." He's like, "Why does he think you're a bad mom then? You're an awesome mom." And I was like, I thank you, I appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So it's brought up some good conversations from us. And again, I spoke with the kids about, well, why do you think maybe he did that? Did he seem like he was really happy and he was feeling good in that moment? And they're like, well, no, he seemed angry. And, I said, maybe a little scared. And they're like, yeah, maybe a little scared. And I said, yeah, we're very different from each other. And, sometimes when that gap seems too big, people don't know where to start having the conversation. So unfortunately, it wasn't my day to sit down with that fellow and have a chat and learn more about him. And I said, we can't change other people. We can just evaluate how we react to a situation. So I could have gotten back in his face. I could have fought him. I'm a black belt. I really can't fight. For anyone, who's listening right now, I have the build of like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. I'm not very strong. But yeah, it's like, I had nothing to prove to that guy. So we just walked away, and then we went, that's too bad. It's too bad that, that's how he spent his whole day. He could have been having fun walking around, eating a snow cone, listening to great music. But
right.
so if nothing else, it's just given them a broader perspective of humanity, and that
Right.
there are all types of people with all types of feelings and all types of approaches, and that they can choose who they align themselves with and who they connect with and who they let into their circle.
And so the other part of, I guess, too, Jillian, is it's a two-way street, right? So
Sure.
I've jumped on interviews and stuff with people from the queer community, and they immediately see me come on the screen and go, oh gosh. Right.
Yeah.
And there's like this built-in resistance to me having you on my show, where they've already kind of decided that this is not going to be a good fit because of who I am as a white guy. And they're like, I don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's an uphill climb for me to prove to you or a guest that my intentions are true, that I'm here to talk to you and build you up and give you a platform and whatever I can do to help.
Yeah.
Right. Be part of the solution, I guess.
Right.
Part of the conversation.
Sure.
But for me, I just find it almost equally exhausting to have to prove that I'm not out to get anyone. I'm here to have a conversation and work together.
Yeah.
And you help me fill in the blanks, please, because that's what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for, if the guy dressed in black with body cameras is one extreme, well, then where on the pendulum can I be as an ally through podcasting, through content creation and partnering and connecting people back and forth and all the stuff we talked about? Where can I find myself on this platform where I can be part of the solution and less of what could be perceived as a threat or someone who is not an ally just because of the way I look? I feel like I'm being put on the shelf and not given an opportunity to be, or I have to prove that I'm an ally.
Right.
And I understand why I need to prove. I get that. But it's almost exhausting that my default setting is, oh, Dave is this.
Right.
And now I have to fight that.
Exactly. That's painting you into a box of, well, he must be like this. And so actually, what came to mind is a quote from Reverend Nadia Bolz-Weber, that she said, we need to preach from our scars and not from our wounds. And basically what that means is, like, we can sit down and we can have these conversations when we've had a certain level of healing. And as you were talking, Dave, all I could think of is that maybe it's not you. Like, maybe some of these people are not in the space or time yet where they feel safe and healed enough to be able to have that conversation.
And that goes both ways.
Sure.
Both ways.
Yeah.
Okay,
And you know what? Like, I'm not for everybody. You are not for what? I know, almost everybody, but there's that guy. And but no, really, like, the interesting thing about writing a memoir, which I'm so grateful that I got to share my story, but the hard part that I've realized about it is that I always try and grow and heal and learn more and become a better version of myself every day or month or so. And so when you write a memoir, it's a time capsule of you at a point in time.
Right. Yeah.
Telling your story. And so there are things in my book, even now, where either it's terminology I used or how I phrased a certain thing, that now that I have healed more and grown more, it's like, well, I would have said that differently. I would have taken a different approach. And so I think everyone is on their own healing journey. And if there are people who are still feeling threatened by you or feeling that they can't necessarily speak to you safely or comfortably, it's not necessarily a reflection of you or anything that you're doing. It may be a part of healing that they still need.
Okay.
And I don't want to, pin that on people too and be like, it's them and they need therapy, because I think that's the easy cop out answer as well. It's just I think if we could all realize that everyone is trying and we're all going to make missteps, and there are people who are going to read my book and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe she said that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe she believes this. We can't throw out the entire story because we don't agree on a certain point, or because I don't know. I know I'm covering a lot of different areas here, and I just it's hard, and it's very sensitive, and it's very raw, particularly for the LGBTQ community right now, when so many things can feel like an attack. But if you are showing up and just asking questions, if they're setting a boundary and you're being respectful of that boundary, if you're asking to learn. I mean, I just, Dave, I think in my experience with you in all our time of friendship, you've been nothing but open to listening and hearing what I have to say, whether you agree or disagree, whether it resonates or it doesn't resonate. You're still here. Like, you've shown up, and that just says so much about your willingness and your support, and always trying to do better and be better. And I'm grateful for that. We need more people like that across the board in all areas.
We need more of those sound bites and snippets on social media than what we're seeing.
Right.
That's what we need.
Definitely.
Right. Like I kind of picture it this way, Jillian. If I was walking up to a building and you were walking behind me, and I opened the door and I see you coming, and you kind of speed up a little bit, like, oh, just 1 second, my arms are full. I'm coming to the door, and I just walk through the door and let it shut behind me. That's what I feel is happening socially right now, is if I feel akin to you, or I feel that you matter in my eyes, I'll hold the door open for you. If I don't, I'm going to just let it swing shut, and you're on your own. Figure it out.
Yeah.
I think we need more people to hold the door open for each other, symbolically.
Yeah.
That no matter who you are, you would hold it open for me, and I would hold it open for you. And in that moment, we recognize we're two human beings. We may be on different paths, but if we would have that ability to see each other in that way, as calm and decent people, helping each other and recognizing each other's humanness and celebrating the humanity that binds us together, I think we can erase that line in the sand.
Right.
Because here we are, you need me and I need you in that moment. And how can we connect? Put everything aside. And in that moment, let's just celebrate the fact that there's two people here who need each other on this spinning rock we're on. And how do we acknowledge each other and make each other feel seen, heard, and loved? What does that look like, and how do we make it happen? And I think if our leadership could figure that out, social media could figure that out, the most militant on both sides could figure that out, I think we could come to a place where there'd be a lot of people waiting to let people in instead of shutting the door on people who don't belong.
Right.
And that's what I'm really hoping for through conversation and dialogue and books and websites and coaching and allies. And that's what I'm hoping for. And that's why I'm so excited about your book, is I'm getting a sense that that's really kind of the heart and soul of this, is here's my story, and this is what I hope to help people with. And that's kind of what I'm getting the feeling from when I talk to you every time.
Yeah. Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking of a line my life coach always tells me when I'm getting upset or prickly about anything. And she says, "Is this how you want to feel about this?" And I'm like, well, no, I want to feel good. I want to be okay. I don't want this to upset me. And I think sometimes in these conversations, we're so busy trying to protect ourselves or defend ourselves. And again, that's coming from our wounds that we have, that we lose sight of the goal of we want to feel good. We want more love in our lives. We want more happiness in our lives. We want more peace in our lives. I don't know anyone who doesn't want a more peaceful, calm coexistence in their life. It doesn't feel good to be angry and scared and all the time. I don't know. Maybe somebody out there does want that, but community feels so good. Friendship feels so good. So to get to that place of, this is the life that I want to feel, I have to hold the door open if I'm going to have that life. I can't let the fear say, I'm going to close this door because I don't know who that person is. I know their arms are full or whatever, but that could be a threat. And I just need to protect myself. You have to think a little farther out. I think we can be very reactionary, thinking of things in the short term and not think long term. How do we want this to play out? And I think where that's reflected in my book is in my relationship with my mom. There's a big story of where we started when we were very close. I thought growing up, I was like, I have the best mom in the world. We were very close. When I came out, our relationship became very fractured. And I had people who said, cut her out of your life. You don't need that negativity. You don't need that people to put you through that. And I finally had somebody who said, well, what if you could have any type of relationship with her, what kind of relationship would you want? And I said, I love my mom. I want to have a relationship with my mom. And they said, okay, so what does that look like? And how do you get there? And can you just love her for where she is right now? Because you can't change her.
Yeah.
You're not going to change her.
Right.
And if you choose that you want that relationship as part of your life, then you just need to love her for where she's at right now. You can still draw boundaries and keep yourself healthy and safe, but don't close the door. And, I had my book launch last night and my mom was there in the audience and taking pictures, and she brought her friends from church and her husband was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life. I was so grateful. And my fiance Jen was there and so many friends from all areas of life. And I'm like, I'm just grateful for whatever reason that I was able to overcome a lot of different fears and just keep the door open. And I hope from the story that maybe it gives other people hope as well, where they feel like maybe that doors have closed in their life, to see if that's still a relationship that they can, a connection that they can still keep that may reopen.
What a great story, Jillian. The one thing that came out in our other podcast we did together as a quote you gave me was, when we know better, we do better. And that stayed with me from that time that we talked earlier all the way to today. And the one thing that I really found joy in was seeing the response of your community, families and family members and friends responding to that episode we did back in the past. And their comments to you about the episode and what they learned about you through our recording time together was so powerful to me, to sit back in the audience and watch that communication happen between you and them. I
Yeah.
felt so honored that this conversation that we did previously opened a door to comments that probably needed to be said many years ago. So that was a really powerful moment for me as a host, just to let you know. I was watching that happen, and I was so amazed that our conversation had that impact. So,
Yeah. Well, and thinking about it now, Dave, I think actually that may have been the first podcast I ever did. I don't know if I revealed that to you in advance. So I was like, oh, yes, sure, I've got this. We can do this. But
good at it.
I was brand new, fresh baby podcaster at that point. And so, yeah, a lot of people had not heard details of my story. And if there's one thing that I've heard over and over again from people in my life who have read my story now, because especially for people who are mentioned in the book, I ask that they read it beforehand, just so that I could have the discussions with them before I was in the midst of book signings and events and everything else. Like if something doesn't feel good to you, let's talk through it. But the one thing that seemed to come back time and time again were people in my life saying, I had no idea everything you were going through.
Right.
I had no idea that this process was so long. They learned so much about me through my story. And that includes my mom saying that as well. And in some ways, I know that really hurt her, because you think as a parent that you know everything there is about your child. And we were close, and I did share a lot. And I also didn't share a lot. Mm-hmm. And now it makes me incredibly paranoid as a parent of like, what are my kids not telling me? I'm nice. Sure they'll write it in their memoir. And
there you go.
Yeah, but one message that I've received recently was a woman who's come out later in life, and she said, I can't wait to read your story because I do feel really alone. I think this will help me. And she said, but then I cannot wait to pass this book on to my mom, because she's having a hard time understanding what I'm going through right now. And we're just not having the conversations that we need to have. Yeah. And I think if she hears your story, that maybe we can talk a bit more. And she'll realize that this isn't a midlife crisis. This isn't some quick decision because I was bored or it's trendy.
No.
So, yeah. And I, it's messages like that make the process of putting myself out there and sharing my story, the fear around doing that, it's easier to kind of put the fear aside when you know that there are people out there who are going to be helped, that it's going to open doors to conversations. And that's what keeps me going. That keeps fueling me to overcome the vulnerability hangover that I seem to have on a regular basis and keep connecting with people, because it's so worth it for more love in this world.
Okay, so before I go to probably my last question for you, let's share the website, let's share contact details, where we can get the book, do all that stuff for me. And then I have a question for you after that, okay?
Okay, so the book is available actually kind of worldwide now, but they've told me US, UK, Canada, and Hay House Australia just picked up the book. There is an ebook version, a paperback version, and there's actually an audiobook that I recorded that is coming out May 30th. I know, Dave. I'm so excited. Yes. Yeah, and please don't be too critical of the part. I realized in the recording that, my ex-girlfriend has a very strong Southern accent, and I was like, how am I going to voice this? Anyways, that's aside. Okay, so so you can buy, I highly recommend that you support your local independent bookstore. If they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it for you, but also the big retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Indigo, the Hay House website. They all have it available for sale. My website is queerabby.com, where you can find my blogs and my podcast. I'm always open to questions that people have. If you ever have a question that you want me to cover, on TikTok, you can find me at Ask Queer Abby. and Instagram, Jillian Abby author. And I don't know why I make all my handles different, but I'm highly elusive. So you have to work to find me, apparently. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, we'll have links to everything in the show notes. Make sure you jump over to the podcast for sure. You're listening on a podcast app. How simple is it for you to click play? Okay, it's really easy. Like, follow, share, subscribe, do all those things. You can do that right now while you're on the phone. So that's easy. My question for you at the end is, to your community, your friends, your family, those who have been following the journey, proudly hoisting the book up in the air, sharing it with their friends and family, what would you like to say to the community that loves and supports you and has been there for you the entire time? What would you like to say to them? I'm getting out of the way. You get to talk to them directly, okay?
Well, I have only a few words for them, and that is thank you from the bottom of my heart, and you saved my life. That's really all there is.
As I watch on Instagram the book signings and the pictures and the smiles and the love and the hugs and the support that I see from your community, and that is beautiful. It's beautiful to watch from a distance up here in Canada. And I just want to celebrate those people that make it a point to surround you with love and support and spur you on and keep you focused on your mission to help people. Because that's why they're there. They want to see you succeed and your message get out there.
Yeah. So many people have shown up for me in so many different ways, whether that was just listening to me tell the same story over and over and over again because I needed to process through it. Whether that was dropping off dinner for me because they noticed that, oh, Jill seems to be losing a lot of weight and I don't know that she's eating a healthy meal. Offering to take my kids for an afternoon so I can just have a little time to take care of myself or have a therapy or a life coaching session or whatever I needed in the time. I mean, there's so many ways we can show up for each other. And even the simple things like the little dopamine burst from a heart emoji on a post, or just the kind words of this is great, or you inspire me, or I needed to hear this today. You know, for a lot of my life, I would ask myself, why am I here? Like, if this is life, why do we do life? And now I know why. And it's because others have stood by my side and propped me up. Not when I was at my best. I mean, now they're all here when it's like, well, this is great. The book's out. And, you know, I was on Good Morning America's list of like 15 spring reads. And like, there's so many wonderful things that are happening with the book. But these people were here for me when I was at my lowest point of, now I have no job and I'm going through a divorce and I'm trying to figure out the world of lesbian dating and I'm losing my mind and I'm losing my hair and I don't know what's happening. And so, I've felt more love in the past few years than I've ever felt in my entire life. And gosh, like how cool to be that person for another person.
Yeah. I think you get more love when you give more love as well. So you're giving out the love and it's coming back. And that's what I love. So
yeah, absolutely.
You've helped our family, Jillian, and you've been a voice in the back of my head that edits my thoughts, directs my path. You've helped me as a father, and our conversations mean more to me than you'll ever know. So thank you for being there for me. And that's why I'm so proud to have you back. And I hope that this conversation doesn't stop, that we can continue talking and continue supporting each other. But I'm so proud to have you on my show.
Thanks, Dave. I'm grateful for your friendship.
There you go. Everyone, head over to the website, head over to the links in the show notes. And again, you have a new podcast to go listen to. And there's the book, Perfectly Queer, from my friend, Jillian Abby. Everyone go pick up a copy, read it, and then also buy a second copy, third copy, fourth copy, and send it off to everyone.
All your friends. Guess what everyone's Christmas gift
everyone's
is this
getting
year.
a book. Just like Oprah, you get a book, you get a book,
you get a book. I love it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jillian. Nice to see you again.
Thanks, Dave.
Jumping here at the very end, I want to thank you for coming. We have listeners around the world, and I got to tell you, as a podcaster, it is so great to hear back from the people who listen to the show. Now, you are still here. The podcast's over. Like we're sweeping up and putting the chairs away. You're still here. So, hi. I would love to talk to you. No, I really, really would. I would love to hear your voice. I would love to hear from you through email. You can do all that at livingthenextchapter.com. I say it fast because I love it. Living the Next Chapter. It's the name of the podcast. .com. How's that for easy? Right? Right. So come on over there and let's have a conversation. You can set up time in my calendar. You can, air quote here, book. Book time in my calendar. Book next chapter. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for being here. See you on the next one. Cheers.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.